This is the story of a young CEO faced with an impossible choice: his billion-dollar dream or the best friend who helped him build it. Brian Matthys and Richard started with nothing but a vision, turning a small garage project into a tech empire, Zenith Core Tech Solutions. Together, they were unstoppable. Brian, the genius behind the innovation, and Richard, the charismatic face of the company. But success came at a cost. When financial discrepancies surfaced, Brian discovered that Richard had been misusing company funds for lavish personal expenses. Confronted with undeniable proof, Brian had to choose: stay loyal to the friend who once stood by him or protect the company and its employees. What happened next shook the tech world and changed their lives forever. You won't believe how it ended. Grab a coffee, sit back, and enjoy this incredible story. Brian Matthys was a visionary, a tech genius with a relentless drive to innovate. His best friend and co-founder, Richard, was his perfect counterpart, a charismatic businessman who could win over anyone with his charm and confidence. Together, they had a dream: to build something revolutionary. It all started in Brian's garage, where late nights of coding and brainstorming fueled their passion. What began as a small project soon gained traction, and before they knew it, Zenith Core Tech Solutions was born. Their company quickly became a game-changer in cloud computing and data security, attracting major investors and industry leaders. Brian focused on the technology, ensuring their products were cutting-edge, while Richard became the face of the company, securing deals and expanding their influence. Their combined skills made them unstoppable, and as their success skyrocketed, so did the stakes. But with power and money came challenges neither of them had foreseen. One afternoon, Maria Torres, Zenith Core's meticulous CFO, knocked on Brian's office door, carrying a folder and a concerned look. "Brian, there's something you need to see," she said, placing the folder in front of him. As Brian flipped through the pages, his stomach tightened. The numbers didn't add up. Extravagant dinners, luxury hotel stays, and private jet rentals, all charged to the company's account. "Who authorized this?" he asked, his voice tense. Maria hesitated before answering. "It's all under Richard's account." Brian felt a chill run through him. Richard? His best friend? His business partner? The man who had helped him build this company from the ground up. He wanted to believe there was some mistake, some reasonable explanation. But the evidence was there, in black and white. Brian clenched his jaw, feeling a wave of disbelief. How could Richard do this? The company they had built together was at stake, and now Brian had to make a decision he never thought he'd face. That evening, Brian sat across from Richard in Zenith Core's sleek conference room, the folder of expenses lying between them. The air was thick with tension. Brian took a deep breath before sliding the folder toward his co-founder. "I need you to explain this." Richard glanced at the documents, barely skimming through them before leaning back with a smirk. "Come on, Brian. It's not a big deal," he said casually. "A few perks here and there. We earned it. We built this company from nothing. What's wrong with enjoying the success?" Brian's jaw tightened. "This isn't about perks. It's about integrity. We have employees who rely on us, investors who trust us. This isn't your personal bank account." Richard scoffed, waving a dismissive hand. "You're overreacting. You think other CEOs don't do the same?" "Lighten up." Brian's frustration boiled over. "This isn't a discussion, Richard. This kind of behavior puts everything we've built at risk. You need to fix this, or we have a serious problem." Richard's smirk vanished, his expression hardening. He leaned forward, locking eyes with Brian. "You wouldn't dare," he said, his voice low and threatening. Brian didn't blink. "I will, Richard. I have to." Silence filled the room as the weight of those words settled between them. The battle lines had been drawn, And Brian knew this was only the beginning. In the days that followed, Richard's behavior took a sharp turn for the worse. He started arriving late to meetings, brushing off important discussions, and treating employees with open disdain. He dismissed staff concerns, made impulsive decisions without consulting anyone. And worst of all, he began openly undermining Brian, mocking his leadership in front of others, questioning his decisions, and acting as if the company belonged to him alone. The whispers in the office grew louder. Employees exchanged nervous glances, unsure of where the company was heading. Maria Torres saw the damage unfolding and approached Brian. "You can't let this slide, Brian," she urged. "If the media catches wind of this, Zenith Core's reputation will be on the line." Brian barely slept. His mind raced between loyalty and responsibility. Richard had been his best friend, his partner in this journey. They had started with nothing, dreaming together in that tiny garage. But now, the man sitting across from him in meetings was not the same person he once knew. Success had changed him, and Brian knew what had to be done. Calling a private board meeting, Brian presented the facts. The evidence of Richard's misconduct, reckless spending, and disruptive behavior spoke for itself. The room was silent for a moment before one director finally spoke. "He has to go." One by one, the board members nodded. The decision was unanimous. Richard was out. Brian took a deep breath. He had made his choice. But the hardest part was still ahead. Telling Richard. The moment Brian delivered the news, Richard's face twisted in fury. "You're firing me?" he shouted, slamming his fists on the table. His voice echoed through the office. "After everything we built together, after everything I've done for this company, you're throwing me out?" Brian met his gaze, steady but firm. "I'm protecting the company, Richard. Your actions left me no choice." Richard let out a bitter laugh, shaking his head. "You think you can just erase me? I made Zenith Core what it is." His voice dropped to a dangerous tone. "You'll regret this, Brian. I'll ruin you." Despite the threats, Brian stood his ground. The board acted swiftly, releasing a public statement confirming Richard's departure, in the company's best interest. Within hours, the tech world exploded with speculation. Reporters camped outside the office, demanding answers. Was Zenith Core in trouble? Could Brian handle the company alone? But Richard wasn't done. Days later, Brian received the news. Richard had filed a lawsuit, accusing Zenith Core of unfair termination and attempting to discredit his contributions to the company. What started as a private battle had now turned into a full-blown corporate war, with every headline dissecting their fallout. As the legal fight dragged on, Brian knew one thing: this was no longer just about business. It was personal. After weeks of intense legal battles, the court finally ruled in favor of Brian and Zenith Core. The evidence against Richard was overwhelming: lavish spending, abuse of company funds, and reckless behavior. His arrogance in court only made matters worse, painting him as someone who had let power and greed consume him. The verdict was clear. Richard had no claim to the company. As the decision was announced, Richard sat in silence, his once unshakable confidence shattered. His reputation was in ruins. Investors distanced themselves, business leaders refused to associate with him, and the media that once praised him now labeled him as the CEO who lost everything. With Richard gone for good, Brian turned his focus back to what truly mattered: the company and its people. He reinforced the values that Zenith Core was built on: trust, innovation, and integrity. Employees, once hesitant and uncertain, now stood firmly behind him. Morale soared, and a renewed sense of purpose filled the office. Under Brian's leadership, Zenith Core didn't just survive, it thrived. New contracts rolled in, partnerships flourished, and the company's reputation grew stronger than ever. Brian had made the toughest decision of his life, but in the end, it had been the right one. Zenith Core's future had never looked brighter. Late one evening, Brian sat alone in his office, gazing out at the city skyline. The battle was over, and Zenith Core was stronger than ever. But as he reflected on everything that had happened, he couldn't shake the weight in his chest. Leadership had come at a cost. He had saved the company, but in doing so, he had lost a friend, a brother he once trusted with everything. A knock at the door broke his thoughts. Maria handed him an envelope. A letter from Richard. Brian hesitated before opening it. It wasn't an apology, but it wasn't filled with anger either. "I see now what you were trying to protect," Richard wrote. "I let greed blind me. I hope one day we can talk again." Brian folded the letter and placed it in his desk. Would they ever rebuild their friendship? He wasn't sure. Some things, once broken, were hard to fix. But he wished Richard well. As he leaned back in his chair, Brian knew one thing for certain. Trust is fragile, leadership is lonely, and success always comes at a price. But no matter how difficult the road, integrity would always be worth it. So, what would you have done in Brian's place? Would you have given Richard another chance, or would you have made the same tough decision to protect the company? Comment below and let's discuss. These kinds of choices aren't easy, but they define who we are as leaders, friends, and individuals. Integrity isn't always the easiest path, but it's the one that truly lasts. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to hit like, share, and subscribe for more powerful stories like this one. And turn on the notification bell so you never miss a new upload. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.